Chapter 9, Part 3, Violet Frankenstein, 1800s. I didn't feel like I had slept, for it seemed that the moment I closed my eyes, Joan was calling my name and stood in the doorway. "We're here," she said. I rubbed my eyes. "Okay," I replied and stood up and put my jacket back on. "What time is it?" "About 2 in the morning," she said. I groaned. I followed Joan to the main deck, where I saw ominous hills and the mountains of a valley and a river running through the middle of the flat valley floor. There were many small villages dotted around and a town surrounding a castle on a small hill. "Where are we?" I asked. "Stirling," she replied. "In Emma's world this is the capital, and where she coordinates the defenses and attacks." "We are safe, right? She's not going to suddenly detect us and think it's the Romans?" "She'll know it's me," Joan smiled with a wink. There was something unnerving about her smile, like a mischievous girl about to throw stones at a passing carriage. "Prepare yourself to see some more wonders," she called as she began to stride excitedly towards the helm. As she moved, the wind caught her coat again, and I noticed another pistol at her hip in a holster. At the helm, she attached herself to the sides of the ears just as she had when steering the ship, and I watched expectantly. After a couple of seconds, there was a soft humming and whirring sound coming from below me. It grew louder and louder until it was the only thing I could hear. Suddenly, a crack cut through the humming and whirring, and at the same time I saw what looked like blue lightning spread across the outer rim of the ship and jolt up through the air to the tip of the balloon. Then the blue lightning vanished, but the humming and whirring continued. In the darkness of night, the strange blue energy was a wonder to behold. As I marveled, another few seconds passed. I jumped and shielded my eyes as the crack and blue lightning cut across my vision, engulfing the ship once more. This happened several more times, getting faster and faster, until it was almost a continuous streak. It became so fast that there was only the shortest of gaps in between each crackle of blue, and the frequency sounded like a continual vuv, almost blocking out the humming and whirring sound entirely. Then, suddenly, the cracking reached its peak, and with one final blue lightning bolt that surrounded the ship, I felt my insides twist and turn. I closed my eyes, and the twisting grew until I felt like my whole body had been wrung like a wet towel. The feeling reversed and eased until I almost felt normal, apart from a slight queasy feeling. Trying to ignore the sickness, I noticed that everything had gone very quiet and still. I slowly opened my eyes. I had fallen on my hands and knees. I pushed myself up and put my hands out to steady myself. It took a second for my surroundings to come into focus, but when they did, I gasped in astonishment. The almost empty valley and hills had completely changed. There were lights everywhere, despite it being night, and as I turned, looking at the carpet of elaborate structures, I felt a lot warmer than I had. The structures and buildings I saw were tall and interconnected by bridges. It was an intricately connected city that must have contained a vast number of people. In the split second I noticed all of this, I had turned 3/4 of a circle and came to face the hills. What I saw made me take a step back. On top of the hill there was a large metallic tower with an umbrella-like roof stretching out like the petals of a flower. A green tinge spread from every direction of the tower, soaking the night sky. I did not know what this vast green shimmering canopy that stretched across the horizon was, but began to ponder. A sudden burst of yellow light appeared in the air just beyond the deck. I shielded my eyes with my arms, and in the dazzling light there was a loud humming sound. Then other lights and humming sounds came from other points around Joan's Zeppelin, creating a cacophony of noise that assailed me. As my eyes came into focus, I saw the outline of what was a far stranger flying machine than Joan's Zeppelin speed. A loud voice cut through the hums. "Joan, you should know better than to just appear over our capital like that. We nearly blew you out the sky." Joan's hands were still on the steering bars in the ears. "My deepest apologies. I'm glad you decided not to fire first. I need to see Emma. Is she available?" "Emma has been informed of your arrival and is expecting you. She isn't happy to have been woken." "She never is," Joan chuckled. I'll face the consequences. As you wish, the voice bellowed. Follow us. With those last words, the lights turned in mid-air, and I saw the flying ship from the side. Its slick angles and curved front looked beautiful, but the turrets and the guns I saw showed it was a deadly fighting machine. You'll need to take a seat or hold on to the rails, Joan called. As she laughed, the steed lurched forward and I dived for the table, pulling myself onto a chair as we followed the flying machine at an incredible pace, almost as if we were racing. From the look on Joan's face, I guess we were. The other machines, with bright lights that surrounded us, went in a number of directions, leaving one hovering where we had been. We sped towards a small lone hill, and on it was one of the largest buildings I could see. A large castle made from a similar sort of metal as the other buildings. To the rear was a large platform with a few differently designed and sized flying machines on it. When we were close, we slowed, and as the noise of the engines and the rushing wind died down, I heard Joan laughing happily. You'll learn quick that these wonderful people love to be serious when necessary, but the rest of the time they enjoy their freedom. To them it's the most precious commodity they have, and to honour it they celebrate every chance to have some fun. Fun? I breathed heavily after the terrifying flight, and raised my eyebrows. Well, I guess there's a fine line between fun and recklessness, but when you fight every day against unimaginable odds, you learn to live in the moment. I can see why you seem to fit in so well here, I muttered, with a watery smile. She laughed and nodded her approval of my jest as she guided the ship down. It didn't take long before it thudded lightly on the solid structure, and I stood from my chair. My legs were like jelly, and it took me a second to think of myself. Not used to the change of flying, lass, came a deep, rumbling voice. I turned to see who had spoken, and there, on a balcony overlooking the platform, was a woman almost as large as my mother's creations. Not at all, ma'am, I replied timidly, and guessed this must be Emma. Her hair was black and tied back so it fell down behind the almost visible gap between her head and back, which could be barely called a neck. The sides of her head were shorn to fine stubble. She wore a loose pale shirt that tried in vain to hide the bulk of muscle underneath, and a green, blue, and black tartan kilt wrapped around her waist and thighs. With my weak reply, she barked a deep laugh. I couldn't tell if it was meant in good humour or derision. I chose to take it in good humour, and smiled up at her as I eyed the two holsters for guns at her hips, and the large sword she leant on as though it was a walking stick. The giant blade should have looked out of place in this strange scientific and technologically advanced place, but the way Emma lightly held the hilt made it look perfectly at home. As the laughter stopped, Emma spoke. Ma'am, she chuckled with a shake of her head. You call me ma'am? We have no such titles of authority in slavery here. Each woman is her own, although we do have a title for those who are suppressed by their own conformity, and that would make you a pomp. Leave her alone, Emma, Joan said. She isn't from here and doesn't know your ways. You know I'm just testing her mettle, Joan. I meant no harm to her. To you, however. And at these words Emma drew a pistol with her free hand and shot. I watched in bewilderment, thinking Joan was about to be hit, but Joan was just as quick and drew and shot her pistol in return. There was a loud deafening crackle as the deep blue ball from Joan's weapon met the light blue of Emma's. As the shots collided, they exploded, and everyone shielded themselves as bits of ice went everywhere. There was a moment of silence, but then echoing laughter erupted from everyone around me. Apparently I'd missed the joke, and once again was left feeling very put out by all the camaraderie that was far more garish than I had ever been exposed to. Come on up, Joan, Emma called as everyone around us continued about their business, and you can explain why you have woken me up in this unnatural hour, especially when I need my sleep to keep me war ready and at my best to fight the treacherous dog Caesar and those rats who serve her. With this, Emma turned, and as she did, I saw shimmering silver metal around her shoulders that went all the way down her back. It hugged her form so tightly that it looked like it was her skin. She vanished into the giant castle, and after she was gone, Joan nudged me with her elbow. Quite a character, isn't she? That's one way of putting it, I said, forcing a smile. You'll get used to her. She's all bark and no bite to her friends, so So just be her friend, and you'll be fine. What happens to those who aren't her friends? That, Violet, you do not want to see firsthand. In her bloodlust, she is on par with the patriarch's brutality. I shivered. You have nothing to fear, though. Come on. And she patted me on the back and led the way through a door below the balcony. After a quick journey down a corridor, up some stairs, and along a couple of other corridors, we came to a magnificently large hall, with stone and metal architecture. Drapes of various tartans hung on the walls, and rows of large benches filled up the hall. At the far end was a drop of steps, about a metre down, and what had to be a queen's table and place for feasting. The fact it dropped below the rest of the room grabbed my attention, and Joan must have seen me staring. As Emma said, they have no titles of what we might call honour. They believe such things bind them and elevate those who should serve. The people chose her to lead them because of her honour, and that is enough for them. However, their leaders always keep reminders that they should consider themselves below the people they serve, and that it's their job to raise them up to something better. It is a worthy philosophy, I said after a moment's reflection. That it is, and it's why I love these people as much as I do. Anyway, enough talk. Emma will be waiting, and she doesn't like that if she could be sleeping instead. With that statement, I hastily followed Joan down the hall to the lowered area and to the side door at the left. Joan knocked once and pushed it open. I followed her into a spacious but relatively small room, which had a large round table in the centre. Emma sat opposite the door we had entered, facing us with her sword laid across the table in front of her, her hands resting on the blade. She gave us a broad smile and gestured for us to take a seat. So, have you finally come to help us in our war against the oppression from Maria and her Roman legions? Joan sighed. We have been over this 1,000 times, Emma. You know I can't. It would be an honour to join you in a battle and support your cause, but this is something I cannot get involved with. There was a pause, and I could see a deep, restrained frustration in Emma's eyes. However, it passed, and Emma barked her laugh as always, which broke the slight tension. You'll have to reject me 1,000 times more, because I won't give up. Someone of your resources and mantle could really sway the struggle in our favour. She stopped and shook her head, then continued. So why have you come? I take it this is not just a friendly visit. It has something to do with this scrawny pomp. My name is Violet Frankenstein, I said, plucking up all my courage to not let this woman abase me with this clearly derogatory term any more. You shouldn't judge me by what you see. I have seen horrors even you might fail to understand, and though I am not battle-hardened and of great stature, I've had my own fights and have proven my worth. I worried I had been too brash, but Emma suddenly chuckled and grinned widely once. You have a warrior's spirit, Violet. I can see why Joan has favoured you with her company. You must forgive me for my harshness. Our nature is to test people with our forwardness to see their worth. It works well. We can tell a fighter from a coward this way. We have a saying, friendship and trust are gifts earned and never given freely. It can be a harsh way to live, but once earned and given, its value is priceless. Isn't that right, Joan? Joan nodded. It's an honour to have earned it, Emma. Of course it is, Emma roared, slapping the table with a hand. Don't you forget it. Joan laughed, and I even chuckled as I started to appreciate and understand this brash but clearly fiercely loyal and honourable woman. Now we are on equal footing, Emma said, with a slight nod to me, before turning to Joan. What brings you here? We've come for weapons. Weapons? You want weapons? Emma bellowed. You might as well just come and steal my husband, too, while you're here at it. There was a slight pause. Yet, to make such a request, this must be serious. We'll need some drink then, won't we? Before Joan and I could protest, she pushed back her chair and was on her feet and at a large cabinet in the corner. She opened it and hooked 3 mugs on her fingers before swinging up a large keg onto the table. In what seemed like one fluid movement, the mugs were filled and placed before us. Emma returned to her seat and raised her mug. We followed her lead and then proceeded to drink. The moment that liquid fire hit my throat, I coughed and swatted it back up. I tried not to, but the will to not insult my host was defeated by my shock at such a lethal concoction. Luckily, my outburst only made Emma laugh, and Joan smile kindly. It takes some getting used to, she said, and I remembered my drinking session with Joan from when I had first met her. With a final fiery swallow, I decided to leave my drink alone. Yes, we are here for weapons. You know I wouldn't ask for such a favor unless my need was great. Joan drank deeply, making me shudder. That is true, my friend. I have always said we would help you any way we could. And now I must keep my word, otherwise what meaning does it have? Follow me, and you can select what you need. Emma led us deeper into the castle, and she and Joan talked about the different weapons Joan would need. But when Emma asked for details of why we wanted her weapons, Joan told her she couldn't reveal that information. The huge woman was clearly annoyed and wanted her curiosity appeased, but she shrugged it off with a laugh and continued to walk and talk with Joan as I followed behind. After we were led through several long corridors with many rooms, we came to a door that, from the outside, looked like any other. Here we have one of our many weapons rooms for a quick access, just in case we are called to battle. Emma paused and chuckled. Or fancy starting one. The walls to our left, right, and behind us were decorated in metallic-looking armor, guns of every shape and size, and devices that would take several pages to describe, and I wouldn't even be able to explain their purposes, as there was no time to ask. In front of us was a long open space with 4 human-like targets at different ranges, all the way to the far end of the room, clearly for testing the weapons. So you want something with extra high electrical output, Emma said to Joan when the door closed behind us. Then this would be the weapon for you. We call it a lightning rifle. You'll understand when you use it. From a wall she lifted a large long-barreled weapon made of finely crafted metal, which looked far superior to Joan's weapons. She gave it to Joan, who hefted it, and then proceeded to explain a lot of things about the gun, most of which I did not understand, nor can remember. Go ahead, Emma then said, pointing to one of the targets. Apparently Joan didn't need telling twice, and pushing 2 buttons either side of the barrel to charge it, she turned. The rifle hummed slightly as she did, and then the humming peaked in a whirling sound, and Joan aimed and pulled the trigger, holding it down for 3 seconds. Lightning rifle was the right term for it. A long stretch of what looked like lightning stretched instantly from the gun to a target, and then when Joan released the trigger, the bolt vanished. So had the target. All that remained were ashes smouldering on the floor. I gasped at the destructive power and wondered if using this on my mother's creatures was fair, but I knew they had to be stopped, and we had to save Aldous, as Joan had promised. Emma drowned out my thoughts and doubts with her loud voice. That was the highest setting, Joan, she laughed. I should have turned it down. That setting uses up all the charge in one go. For a last desperate shot against impossible odds, it's worth using, but for longevity, it's best setting it at a lower power. Give it here. Emma pulled out a dull grey cylinder from the stock and added another that glowed like light. I'll give you a few charges, so use them well. Emma then took down a second weapon with a shorter and stockier barrel from the wall. She told us it shot a magnetic pulse, and after Joan had admired and learned how to use it, she fired it for practice, even though it had no effect on the targets as they were not electrically active. The only signs that it had ever been fired was the shimmer through the air as the pulse sped to its target, and a slight hum that died when it hit. The last weapon Emma presented was a freeze rifle. That has only been invented recently, Emma said proudly as she caressed it almost lovingly. I thought the ice shower we received when we arrived was something new, Joan replied. I take it one of your pistols has been upgraded to the freeze ability. It has, Emma replied with a familiar grin. It works similarly to the lightning rifle, except the balls it fires will freeze whatever it hits if it isn't too hot, or designed to counter the shots. This will be of much worth against one of our foes. Thank you for your trust and help, Emma. Please know I would never ask unless I needed it. I know, you're a cowgirl. Don't go thinking this is a habit, though. I can't just give these weapons away all the time. We have a war of freedom to win here. I know the sacrifices you make. Joan nodded with understanding. I simply watched, feeling there was clearly history that bound these kindred spirits together in some way, but I was not going to spoil the moment by asking. Joan then smiled softly, tapped a few buttons on the side of the freeze rifle, and shot at one of the targets. The human-shaped target became coated in a sheet of ice from where the ball had hit. Very effective, Joan complimented. I bet Maria wishes she could get her hands on this. She never will, Emma said through gritted teeth, and a fire appeared in her eyes that could have melted the ice on the target. With a shake of her head, the fire rescinded. She turned with a want in her eyes towards Joan. I guess you'll be leaving now. I'm afraid so, my friend. Next time you must stay longer and help us beat the Roman scum. I know you have your code of non-interference, unless you have to, but we are 3 weeks away from joining with our allies in a vital attack on some key military positions of the Romans. If we can win and secure them, we might even have a shot on Rome and killing Maria and the Empire for good. What is important to you is important to me, Joan said. If I can, I will return to see the outcome and perhaps offer tactical advice. But I cannot join in. You old dung mutter. I knew you'd come around, Emma beamed. Just having you here will be of value, and who knows, you might fight by my side. If all goes well, I shall see you at some point before your attacks, Joan said, ignoring the last comment. However, I have concerns I must attend to, with their own risk, so remember, if I do not show, it is nothing personal. I'll show you back to the flight deck, then. Emma took the lightning rifle and a bag full of different charges, while Joan carried its freeze counterpart, and I was given the magnetic pulse-firing weapon. The walk to Joan's ship was sombre and quiet. Emma had lost all her bravado and seemed like a deflated balloon. We reached the giant horse, put the weapons on board, and gathered by the ladder propped against the side. Emma then turned to me. Take care of Joan for me. She has more value than perhaps you realize. Watch her back at all times, and watch your own. She hesitated for a moment, before the corners of her mouth curled up into a smile. She gave a slight nod. You are a quiet one, Violet, and to not let me push you around earlier shows there is courage and strength in you. I wish you victory in whatever battle you are about to fight. It has been an honor to meet you, Emma. Thank you for your help, I replied simply, not knowing what else to say. Emma then turned to Joan, and without a word they embraced and slapped each other so hard on the back it probably left bruises, even through the metal plating on Emma's armor. They parted with a reciprocal smile and turned their backs on each other, Joan climbing the ladder to her ship and Emma striding with the prowess of an Olympian goddess back into her castle. I turned from the image of Emma, and before I climbed up the ship I noticed a name pasted on the neck. Chi Cheng, it read, in ornate script, and I guess the name must have meant something to Joan. But the time didn't feel right to pry, not with the sense of urgency that cut through the air, and so I resolved to ask her if I got the chance, and climbed onto the Zeppelin. Joan was ready at the front, her hands locked on the bars within the horse's ears that she used to steer. She looked deep in concentration, so I sat at the table and watched the castle drift away from us as we rose. After 10 minutes of flight, we reached a similar spot to where we had come in. One of Emma's flying ships waited there, hovering in the sky. Joan paid it no attention. In the same way we had arrived, the device that made us cross over to different universes charged up. It expelled its blue lightning over and over, until we suddenly vanished and reappeared in a much darker, plain-looking countryside of valley and hills. I felt nauseous again, but it quickly passed, and the ship turned and began moving fast through the air. With the course set, Joan came from the helm and sat with me. It's always difficult to leave Emma and her people. What happened to give you such a strong bond? I ventured to ask. That's a story for another time, Joan said, sitting up straight and seeming to push her nostalgia and reflection aside. It's time to get some more sleep, I think. I've set a course for the American continent, and we should be there in 3 days. We can talk more tomorrow, but I need some sleep. I accepted her reply to my question, and agreeing that sleep was needed, I suddenly felt the keenness of my own exhaustion. It had been a long day, and it was strange to think that that very morning I had been married to Percy. So much had happened since then. I lay down on my bed, and for a few minutes marveled at the great city I had seen in another universe, but tiredness soon swallowed up those thoughts. 3 days have passed in relative simplicity since that first proper sleep, and I have spent most of my time writing this full account of all that has happened. My thoughts are often of Percy, and if he was well. I miss him dearly, but he is my strength to stay focused and complete this task. I just hope his health is improving. My mind often wanders to dark places and things of the worst. I must have hope that all will be well. It's how he would want me to be. I have also been talking with Joan and enjoy listening to her many stories of her adventures on different worlds. Some are so fanciful, so strange, that a part of me longs to join her. I imagine myself in a leather-long coat and huge hat, steering the horse Zeppelin as we visited many worlds and civilizations. Each time, however, the image of Percy, of my future family and children, burn away such whimsical notions, that I would force myself to push my longing for him to the back of my mind. During a meal of cooked fish and potatoes, I decided to ask Joan about the name Chi Cheng. Her eyes had welled up almost immediately, and she wiped them quickly as her cheeks reddened and eyes widened in surprise. To see her so overcome with sadness took me by surprise also. She appeared so vulnerable. Before I could apologize, she shrugged her shoulders, and the corners of her mouth rose in a forced smile. "I can't talk about him, Violet," she replied, "but I will tell you he is my motivation for all I do, and especially for a mission like this." All I could do was nod respectfully, and continue eating, not knowing what to say, but now understanding why she lived this solitary life. Once we had finished our food, Joan broke the silence, and was back to her enthusiastic self. We began planning our liberation of Aldous, and how we will extinguish the Patriarch and the two cruel sons. We debated long and hard about whether to use stealth, or to simply fly the ship into the center of the town, and use the weapons from the top of the deck to destroy the undead, the Patriarch and his two sons. We have chosen the first, as risking damage to the ship would be too great a cost. Joan has also theorized that if we kill the Patriarch, the undead will no longer be animated when close to him, so he will be our main target. When I haven't been engaged in our battle plans or writing this diary, I have browsed the strange books from her small library, and gazed out across the seemingly endless ocean, pondering this wild and tragic journey, and all that has happened since my mother and I left our home. I have missed her and her counsel this past year, but I hope I will correct her mistakes. I miss Percy too, and part of me wishes he could have joined us, but I am torn with this. My natural tendency is to want to protect him and keep him safe, and perhaps I would have wanted him to stay home, even if he wasn't ill. Not that he would have let me, and I see now that this is the right thing. He is strong and more courageous than I am, so why not have him with us? Joan and I had a good talk about it. "You certainly do not need to protect your husband, or indeed any man," she said, when I told her how I felt. "Of course there's no harm in wanting to, and even doing it, but not to their detriment and suppression. If we had spent more time with Emma and her people, you would have seen that. Men are fierce, capable, and stronger than your society realizes. If Percy was here, he certainly would have increased the odds of success. More than you, if I'm honest. Not that I don't have faith in you for what is to come, but I can already see he has an inner strength he's learned that you haven't." "I know," I replied. "I just get protective." "Well, don't. Do you not think men get protective of women? Men are as capable as women in all things. They just need you women to stop holding them back. I know you are starting to see that since you met Percy, and learned a lot from all he has taught you. But you need to let go of a lot of the false ideas about women and men's roles and strengths. They are human roles and human strengths." I paused and tried to embed these wise words in my mind and heart. "Thank you for helping me," I continued. "It's not easy, but it's the right thing, and I'm thankful I met Percy, who has opened my eyes to this. We will both do great things by working together, I promise." Her words kept me on the right path. I miss him so much, and if there is any way that I can hasten my return to him, I will, but not before doing what must be done. When it is done, I can use all that I have seen and learned, and work with Percy to ensure equality is achieved, assuming I make it through this with my life, of course. But that is enough reverie and speculation. We have crossed the vast ocean and continent, and are nearing the place Joan fled from. I am nervous for the unpredictability of what will happen. I am in my room and waiting for her call. It is just after dark, and Joan has called down to me from the upper deck. It is time to implement our plan.